Thank you. So today, I'm going to compare how the solitary animals, the ant societies, and the human society use energy. And I will try to convince you that when it comes to energetic efficiency, an ant colony is equivalent to a whole animal. And the human society, on one hand, it has something similar to ants, but on the other hand, it has something very unique. And then I will argue that there might be some lessons that we can learn from ants. So for a long time, the ecologists have suggested that one ant colony can be seen as one single animal. And in many books and papers have been published on this topic. But most of those comparisons between ant colonies and the solitary animals were qualitative. And I want to show you some new research data and to bring this comparison to a quantitative level. So here's the key idea. The most important signature of life is metabolism, the energy usage. So if one ant colony is really just one single animal, then the way it uses energy must be comparable to solitary animals. So the energy usage is a very, very complex process. But for a long time, people have known that for solitary animals, their energy usage can be precisely predicted by their body weight. And it increases with the body weight, but not proportionally. So let me tell you what this means. So here we have a horse. The horse body weight is about 10,000 times larger than the mouse. And if the energy usage increases with body weight proportionally, then the horse would need 10,000 times more energy than the mouse. But it's not proportional. So the energy requirement for a horse is only 1,000 times larger than the mouse. And we found the same thing in the ant colonies. The whole colony's energy usage increases with the colony's size, but again, not proportionally. So it's like if one ant uses 1 unit of energy, and you put 10,000 ants together, and you would think this group would need 10,000 units of energy. But when you put ants together, when they form a society and a network, the magic happens. The whole group only needs 1,000 units of energy. And people also found that in solitary animals, the average energy usage of one single cell depends on the body weight of the animal from which the cell is taken. So in small animals' body, one cell on average needs this much energy to operate. But the same cell, same function, same structure, you move it into a larger animal's body, it only needs this much energy to operate. So in larger animals, the cells become more energetically efficient. Now, why is that? I often give this analogy to my students. As a student, you live in Rolla. You probably have a car. You share a big house with 2 or 3 other people. The same you move to Manhattan, New York City. It's like a much larger animal. Very unlikely you will keep your car, and it's impossible to have a house in Manhattan. So you share the bus or subway and apartment building with many, many, many other people. Right? So the same you in the larger city becomes more energetically efficient. And this is because you live in a larger network and you share with more people. And same thing here. Right? In larger animals, more cells share one piece of energy. And the interesting thing is, if you take the cells out of the body, you isolate it from the society, from this network, then people found it doesn't matter from which animal you take it, the cellular energy becomes a constant. And we found the same thing in ant colonies. The per capita energy usage for one ant depends on the size of the group in which the ant lives. So in small groups, the one ant on average needs this much energy to operate. The same ant living in the larger group only needs this much energy to operate. So in the larger groups, the ants also become more energetically efficient. And again, the interesting thing is if you take the ants out of the group, you're isolated from the network and society. Now it doesn't matter from which group you take it, their energy usage become a constant. So why larger you are, the more energetically efficient you are, people do have some understandings of this. So in the solitary animals, the cardiovascular system is the network that transports oxygen, energy, and all that. And people found that to minimize the cost of transportation, some capillaries, which are the smallest blood vessels, must be closed under normal condition. They don't work. And in larger animals, relatively more capillaries are closed. So more cells are forced to share one piece of energy that is delivered by one capillary. And those closed capillaries can be activated when the animals are in crisis. So for example, if you have to run away from the bad guys, the predator, or you yourself are the bad guy, you run for the prey, then the closed capillaries will be reopened so that you can increase your ability of transporting oxygen immediately. So we hypothesized the same thing for the ant colonies. The larger colonies have relatively more inactive ants. Those ants do not work, so their energy usage is lower than those working ones, so that the larger colonies, which have relatively more this kind of ants, have a lower per capita energy usage. And those inactive ants can be activated when the colony is in crisis. And to test this hypothesis, we split ants into groups with different sizes, like 30 ants, 50, 100, 200, and so on. And we measured two things simultaneously. The first is the energy usage, and the second is at any given moment, the percentage of the active ants in the group. And we found this percentage decreases with the group size. So in the small group, about 50% of the ants are active at any given moment. And this value decreases to 20% in the large groups. And this decrease can perfectly explain why in the small group the energy usage, per capita energy usage for one ant is high, but in the large group is low. Right. So although we're not 100% sure, we do have some evidence to believe that those inactive ants are not working, not because they are too young or too old or too sick and all that. They don't work because of the limitation of the communication in the network. Right? So the ants do not have Facebook or WhatsApp. Right? So it's not like when one ant finds food, all the other ants will get information about food immediately. So if every ant in the group works, then those who do not have the information of food will just be walking and wasting their time and energy. So to minimize the energy cost and increase the efficiency of the whole group, some ants must be at rest, not spending energy. And if this is true, we can manipulate the structure of the network to change the individual's behavior. For example, what if we shut off all the communications in the network or remove some active members from the network? Would this activate more inactive ants, or would this inactivate some active members? We don't know. This is something we're trying to figure out. And is this also true in the human society? It remains to be seen. So overall, living in groups leads to high efficiency. But meanwhile, this also may lead to the loss of autonomy. So here we have a trade-off between the collectivism and the individualism. In solitary animals, the cells living in this multicellular society, most of the cells need to sacrifice their reproduction to serve the sex cells. And at some moment, many of those cells need to kill themselves for the whole group's good. And if they refuse to do so, they become the selfish cancer cells. And that's something we try to get rid of. And same thing in the ant colonies. Right? The workers are altruistic. They sacrifice their reproduction to serve the queens. And people also found that in larger colonies, the loss of this autonomy becomes more severe. So in small colonies, many individual workers still have their own mind, their own will. When they're looking for food, they decide where they want to go. Right? But in the larger colonies, most of the individual workers completely lose their own mind, their own will. So they don't know where they are going. They don't know what they are doing. They just blindly follow the majority. And we have kind of seen the same thing in the human societies. The typical examples would be Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. As a whole, those countries were efficient, but their people didn't have individual freedom. Right? So some historians believe this is probably why before the Second World War, ecologists were so enthusiastic about collectivism. But after the war, some of them stopped talking about it, and some people were worried that if we overemphasize on collectivism, the human will descend to the level of ant and have no sense of selfhood. So is human society really comparable to the ant society? Not really. Let me give you one of the reasons. So about 10 years ago, a group of scientists studied how the population size of cities affect the cities' energy usage, infrastructure, and the social activities. And they found two kinds of quantities. The first kind is analogous to similar quantities in biology. They are all about energy usage and the infrastructure, such as total road surface or the total length of electrical cables and the number of the gas stations in the city and so on. And those quantities are driven by efficiency so that the larger cities have a lower per capita value. In New York City, thousands of people share one gas station, and here in Rolla, only hundreds of them share one gas station. So if the human society is all about this kind of quantities, then our cities are just giant ant colonies. Right? But luckily, we're humans. We have civilizations. So people found there's another kind of quantity. Right? They are purely due to civilization, and they are related to the social nature of the cities, such as number of the schools, hospitals, number of the so-called super creative people, number of the inventions, and so on. They do not have the counterpart in biology, and they are not driven by efficiency. So the larger cities have a higher per capita value. The larger cities have more schools, more hospitals, more people with PhD degrees, more inventors, and all that. So it seems that in larger cities, individuals have more freedom, more resource, and more opportunities to develop themselves. It's opposite of what we see in the ant society. But this also comes with another trade-off. The larger cities also have a higher crime rate, more infectious diseases, and more pollutions and all that. So group, individual, efficiency, freedom, the evolution of organisms and society is full of trade-offs and compromises. So just like the ancient Chinese saying, keep the balance, and only so you can have harmony. Thank you.